Caleb Williams just snuck into our top 10 quarterback rankings for 2025. We talked through our way too early consensus 2025 quarterback rankings on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
This week, we are going through our way too early rankings at each position for our top 10 consensus rankings. We did running backs on Monday, wide receivers on Tuesday. So if you missed those shows, go listen. Today, we'll be talking through our top 10 quarterback rankings for next season. And we had two guys here tie at number 10 in our consensus rankings. So I wanted to talk about them both. And it's Caleb Williams and Brock Purdy. Two very different quarterbacks, right? But with Caleb Williams, let's start there because I think that's probably going to be the most shocking one that he hits our top 10 after a disappointing rookie season where he didn't come close to finishing top 10, right? Only averaged 14.9 fantasy points per game. But I think he showed a lot of flashes. He showed that he had high ceiling scoring, a bunch of games over 22 fantasy points. When he was clicking, he was actually really good. He can run the ball. He could throw deep. He could throw a bunch of passing touchdowns. The issue was the consistency wasn't there. And also the coaching was pretty terrible too, right? So this is all just hoping Ben Johnson could fix him, allows him to still rush, and then hopefully he can become a more consistent passer from there.
Yeah, I think you're just looking at a better overall offense. I mean, you get a good scheme in there, and we had Jane Daniels benefit from that immediately with Cliff Kingsbury and the weapons. And he still has the weapons, right? I mean, we'll see what they do with Keenan Allen in free agency. They could let him walk, but you still have three targets there if they keep DJ Moore. You have DJ Moore and Rome Odunze and Cole Kmet. We know the tight end was a big part of what Ben Johnson was doing with Sam Laporta in Detroit. So you have three targets there. And DeAndre Swift, don't forget about him. He's not all that exciting, maybe in terms of running the ball, but he's still a key receiver that they'll use, right? We know they were very good in Detroit with using Jahmyr Gibbs. It's a kind of interesting. Swift was kind of the replacement there in delay in Chicago. And then you had, of course, David Montgomery go the other way. So interesting there. David Montgomery thrived in that scheme. And I think Swift can do well here and produce. We'll see. I think they're going to pair him with a better power running back, right? But overall, you look at the offensive line, that's going to be a priority. Ben Johnson had that being a big deal, right? In Detroit, that was a strength. So I bet they upgrade the offensive line. The weapons are good enough. The scheme is better. The arrow is pointing way up here in general for Caleb Williams. So he should make the biggest jump. He was down there QB2 last year, but I think he easily jumps into QB1. And we're saying he's going to jump the top 12 and go into the top 10.
Yeah, and I really do. I think he has a lot of upside. I'm excited to see what he could do. I think he'll be a really great value this year with just how his rookie season went. Now, the other guy in our top 10 here, Brock Purdy, he was the quarterback 10 in fantasy points per game in 2024. And it didn't feel like a good year, right? But that was without Christian McCaffrey for pretty much the entire season. Brandon Ayuk, he tore his ACL after 7 games. Trent Williams missed a huge chunk of the season. Ricky Pearsall, their first-round wide receiver, didn't play the first half of the year. And then plus Brock Purdy himself was dealing with a shoulder injury to his throwing arm for a big chunk of the second half of the season. And even from week 6 through 17, he was averaging 19 fantasy points per game. He didn't play in week 18 due to the injury. But when you look at week 6 through 17, all really good games besides 2 games in there that were just complete disasters. One was the snow game coming back from, he injured his shoulder in week 11, missed week 12, came back to play in Buffalo in week 13 in a massive just down fall of snow, right? And it was miserable. And then week 15, it was raining, torrential rain, and that stunk. The rest of the games, fantastic for him. 49ers defense is lacking there, and they have a lot of guys that are free agents. So I still think he's going to have to pass a lot next year. Brock Purdy, quarterback 7 in points per game in 2023 and quarterback 10 in 2024. I don't know how you don't put him top 10 next year.
Yeah, and he's very efficient in terms of executing this offense. He has a great yards per attempt when he's got Brandon Ayuk in there and being able to stretch the field. And look, even if they move on from Deebo Samuel, he can make it work with his three main guys who have been basically his three main guys. Brandon Ayuk, let's hope he comes back healthy, Juwan Jennings and George Kittle. So that trio alone, McCaffrey can help, right? If he's healthy, he's going to catch a few balls and take them to the end zone. That still counts in the Brock Purdy touchdown column as well. So everything points up. Again, you just have to wash a lot of the 49ers season out here. That's with the injuries and everything that happened. It wasn't just skilled players. You had Trent Williams later. So I think this is going to be a nice rebound season for Purdy. You can't go totally nuts here. I think he has a limited ceiling, but he has a very high floor.
Yep, he does. And again, like, he's going to be a late round draft pick. He's going to be a value. And I do think he'll be overlooked, but hopefully his weapons can stay healthy this year. Number 9, it's Patrick Mahomes. What do you do with this man, right? Because the best quarterback in the league. But for fantasy, the last 2 years, I mean, he's averaged 17.7 fantasy points per game this year. That was quarterback 11 in points per game, quarterback 12 overall. The year prior, it was right there, the same, 17.5 fantasy points per game. So these last 2 seasons, pretty much exactly the same of disappointments. We know he has the incredible ceiling, right? We've seen the quarterback 1 seasons. We've seen, or quarterback 1 or quarterback 2 in 2022 and 2020 and 2018, like multiple years of evidence that he can be this elite league winning fantasy quarterback. It just hasn't happened the last 2 years. But we have him at number 9. We have him coming back, being a little bit better than what he was the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs defense could also take a few hits here. Nick Bolton's a free agent. They've got some issues in their line rotation, and they got to figure out some secondary things as well. So I think the Chiefs defense should take a step back. The other thing is, does Rashee Rice come back and be healthy, first of all, and second, avoid any discipline there? Then you're cooking with gas a little bit with wide receivers for the first time in a while with Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. A lot of speed, a lot of ability to finish drives in the end zone. Then the other variable is, of course, Travis Kelce. Does he come back? And if he comes back, can he return to form that we saw in the past, or do they just move on and find another tight end and can really have that potential? Maybe they go out and trade for one, because the free agency really stinks for tight end. I don't see them signing Juwan Johnson and being happy with that, right? If Travis Kelce retires, or just sticking with Noah Gray. So again, if Rice, Worthy, and a tight end, whether it be Kelce or a guy that they pick up from elsewhere, can come together, then you all of a sudden have the weapons. This running game was not all that good last year, so they might have the extension of the running game and find a pass catcher of that role. So overall, Mahomes says to me that he's going to rebound. And again, a lot of people might have had the perception that he's much lower, but he was right up there with Kyler Murray, who was a disappointment as well, that we thought at 10, 11 in that range in scoring. So that's average scoring. So this is not a stretch to put Patrick Mahomes one spot higher than that.
Now, number 8 is Jared Goff for us. And I will say we were a little bit different on him. You had him at quarterback 7. I am at quarterback 11. So he ends as our quarterback 8 in our consensus rankings. He was the quarterback 6 in total points this year, quarterback 7 in fantasy points per game. But it was by far his best season in terms of passing touchdowns at 37, in terms of yards per pass attempt, 8.6, in terms of fantasy points, 19.1. I mean, the years prior, even with Ben Johnson in 2023, he was at 17 points per game, 2022, 16.7. So that was a big jump up, even with a great coordinator. And now he lost that coordinator, right? And I do think that's going to give him a hit. I do think once we get into our summer rankings, I'll be surprised if Jared Goff's still sitting there. I'm going to try to get you to knock him down a little bit. But, you know, he did have a fantastic year this year. And if Ben Johnson leaving doesn't hurt him too much, he still should be a capable fantasy asset, right? He has all the weapons. I just don't know if we can trust him to throw 37 touchdowns again, or even close to that. And he offers no running upside.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, these guys that have pocket passing, and the production from last year was just so high that I also thought without Ben Johnson, maybe the running game won't be as effective, and he's going to keep it up. But you're right. The touchdowns are really the concern here. And the defense, again, we'll see what happens to that, right? They also lost Aaron Glenn, and we'll see about Aiden Hutchinson returning, but they still have a lot of things to fix now. If they get Myles Garrett, Then all of a sudden, you're looking at a much better defense, and maybe they go back to grinding games out with the running game, and they don't have a lot of scoring for Jared Goff. So you're right. I think he could drop a little bit more. We need to have some more information about the rookies, first of all, then the guys in front of him and the guys behind him, right behind him, and see where we want to go there. So again, Goff, I'm willing to move him down and keep my ears open and see what's happening here throughout the offseason. But yeah, for right now, what he's accomplished, I think we keep him really just a couple of spots. Actually, he's a drop off here, right? A couple of spots lower than he finished last year.
Yeah, I do think Jared Goff could be a bit of a disappointment. We know he kind of struggles on the road too. He had a great schedule with or not even on the road, but outdoors. And remember, like, he had an amazing schedule with so many dome games. So I don't know what his schedule looks like for next year. We'll have to check into that. We are going to get through the rest of our top 7 in our consensus wide receiver rankings with Justin Herbert making the list. And that would be the first time he made a top 10 rankings in quite a long time. We'll get to that right after a short break. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Are you ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. This is only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, number 7 on our consensus quarterback rankings for 2025 comes Justin Herbert. And, it hasn't been fantastic for him in fantasy. Now, he was the quarterback 11 this past year, quarterback 13 in points per game, quarterback 12 in points per game in 2023, disaster of a season 2022 at quarterback 17. And the last time we saw him be an elite fantasy quarterback was 2021 when he was the quarterback 2. Now, I will say the first half of the season, it was slow. It was a slow burn for this Chargers offense, right? With Jim Harbaugh out there. Averaged just 11.7 fantasy points per game from weeks 1 through 7. But the second half of the season, weeks 8 through 18, Herbert averaged 19.6 fantasy points per game. That's more than what Jared Goff averaged this year. That's just below Jaden Daniels' average this year. So I think we did see what he was capable of in this offense. And I'm excited for him to get to pass more this upcoming year and hopefully build that connection with Ladd McConkey. And we'll see who else they sign for him to have around him.
Yeah, there's some rumors that they might be looking at a Tyreek Hill trade. That would be insane if they get him there. There's rumors overall that the Chargers are looking to upgrade at wide receiver. Look, Quentin Johnson did what he could. He was a touchdown scorer, but Ladd McConkey is their clear go-to guy in the middle of the field now. I think they'll also upgrade tight end in the draft, and that'll be a big factor in the Greg Roman offense as well. So the key, again, we're looking at most quarterback in their scoring, and it's getting those 3 consistent weapons. And Herbert did it in a run-heavy offense with limited weapons that he was transitioning, right? He was going off Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, didn't have 2 familiar veterans. Then he was getting used to a rookie and McConkey. So there was so much transition. Even their tight ends were new, right? So I look at this like there's so much newness and absorbing of a new scheme, the demands of Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. Now that's over, right? The install is there. It's done. And what we're saying is that we think Justin Herbert is going to be more of the fantasy quarterback we saw after that week 8 kind of light bulb went on and the efficiency and production of this offense. So I'm very excited. I think Herbert, he's got such amazing talent here. It's been untapped a little bit with some bad schemes, but I think it goes off the charts here well. And look, everything points to finishing well in the top 8 this year for Justin Herbert, and 7 might be scratching the surface.
Now, number 6 is Baker Mayfield for us. And you might be saying, well, Michelle, you're saying Jared Goff had an outlier year. Baker did too. And he certainly did, right? By far his highest fantasy points per game. I mean, it was 13 more passing touchdowns than he's ever had in a season in his career at 41. Quarterback 4 overall and in points per game behind only Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow. Fantastic fantasy season. And we only have him coming down a little bit. Do I think the passing touchdowns are likely to stay that high? No. But what makes me feel confident about still sticking with Baker to be a really good fantasy quarterback is all of a sudden his rushing, right? When I'm talking about all these career highs, he also had 378 rushing yards this year and 3 rushing touchdowns. He never had more than 165 rushing yards in any season in his career before this year, but he was a willing scrambler. Like anytime that he had pressure and he couldn't find someone, he just took off and run and he looked good at it. So if he's going to put that as part of his game, then he becomes a much safer fantasy quarterback with the ceiling that he showed us this year. So do I think 6 might be a little hefty for him? Sure. But when you're comparing him to the other guys behind him, I don't think he's any more risky than they are.
Yeah, we'll see what they do with Chris Godwin in free agency and if they want to keep him. But he was cooking with Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan down the stretch. So the McMillan emergence could say goodbye to Godwin. He's getting a little older, coming off a major injury to his ankle. So this is the second major injury for Godwin. He had torn ACL a couple years ago in the Brady era. So when you look at this, I say, hey, the weapons are there. Look, he lost his offensive coordinator, but he did this last year too. Dave Canales to Liam Cohen. Now we're going off Canales and Cohen, yet to a third coordinator, but he's used to coordinators changing all the time. And I think there's a lot of concepts and schemes that are going to remain here. This Bucs passing game is on fire, plays well off the running game. So a lot of things they do well are still going to continue. Now, yeah, it's really hard to duplicate the 40 touchdowns. It's just really hard to get there. So I think there's a little bit of a slip in that part of his scoring, but again, this is still dropping him a couple spots. And keep in mind that he was also a very strong scoring quarterback 2 years ago in the top 10, top 12 there with Canals. So again, this drops him a little bit more reasonable, kind of in between his 2 finishes in 23 and 24.
Another guy who threw over 40 passing touchdowns this year lands at number 5 for us, and it's Joe Burrow. Quarterback 3 in total points and points per game in 2024 behind only Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. And I mean, anytime he's healthy, right, and plays the full season, he's only played more than 10 games in 3 seasons in his career. And those 3 seasons, he threw 34 touchdowns, 35 touchdowns, and 43 touchdowns. We know his defense is bad. I don't think they're going to be able to fix it in one offseason. They are looking to either franchise tag Higgins, maybe re-sign him, right? That would be great for him. But we know exactly what Joe Burrow is, and he's going to get you around those 21 fantasy points per game. He's going to throw a bunch of touchdowns, and he has Jamar Chase, who we have as our number 1 wide receiver in our rankings. Joe Burrow is obviously dependent on his passing touchdowns, but it seems like he's going to get it every year.
Yeah, he's going to keep delivering, and he's the one pocket passer we're going to totally trust. I mean, a lot of these other guys, really the rest of our list is all cheat code quarterbacks that would fall into that with their running, padding their stats. But he's the one guy that we think is going to be a prolific passer throughout his career. And he's also a pretty good athlete when needed. He can run out of the pocket and make plays when that occurs. It's not a part of his game where he's going to really lean on it every week, but he can do that and is capable of padding those stats that way if scrambled in certain games. We've seen it in the past as well. So yeah, if he plays a full season, he's a lock here to finish as a top 5 QB. So I love it. Joe Burrow, lock it in. And again, if it was any other year, Michelle, it would have been basically him and Lamar Jackson battling for MVP with the numbers he put up. That's how good he was last year in reality and fantasy.
And number 4 comes Jaden Daniels. We've talked a lot about him this offseason already, so we don't have to dig in too much. We know his potential. Quarterback 5 as a rookie, quarterback 6 in points per game. But again, it's 2 games that he was taken out early. One, I mean, he suffered the rib injury like instantly and barely played at all. And the other one, he didn't play the second half. You just take out those 2 games and just count the games he actually played, at least had 15 passing attempts, which was 15 games this season. He averaged 23 fantasy points per game. That's more than Josh Allen, who was the quarterback 2 in points per game, by almost a full point. So Jaden Daniels, we know what he can do. Maybe 4 is even too low for him, but the 3 guys we have ahead have been doing it now for what, 4, 5, like for a handful of seasons where they've shown their consistency and how great they are. That's why Jaden Daniels is at 4 and not higher, but I'm fine if someone wanted to rank him higher than that too.
Yeah, I'm very sad because this is going to make me pay a lot more to get Jaden Daniels. I liked him when he was in the 10 to 12 range. I could afford him after some of these guys, but I'm just going to resign to the fact that I probably won't be having shares of Jaden Daniels, but maybe I'm going after Caleb Williams this year, as we've talked about earlier. But yeah, that's my only regret with this ranking is that you can't steal Jaden Daniels anymore like you did last year. You're going to have to pay a pretty penny to get him with your draft capital. So just keep that in mind, and you might have to be even more aggressive than that because there's going to be a lot of people excited about its rookie season and wanting to do that. Now, we will get into our top 3. I'm thinking you guys and gals out there kind of have an idea who's in the top 3, maybe not the order. So we'll get into that here in our final segment on Locked On Fantasy Football. All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into same-game parlay. Those are a lot of fun to play. They have a lot of features to love at FanDuel because live betting is important, and live betting feature at FanDuel keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether you're backing your favorite team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3. You've never missed your chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, FanDuel customers new to the site can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for a shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue and close the show. So let's count it down here from 3 to 1. We'll find out who number 1 is by telling you 3 or 2 are, but let's start it. Who's number 3? Who's fallen in this Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts trio?
Yeah, so we're going to put Jalen Hurts because among Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, I think everyone would agree that Jalen Hurts would be the worst NFL quarterback out of that group. And also like inconsistency with passing touchdowns as well, right? He only had 18 passing touchdowns this year. Now still finishes the quarterback 5 in 2024 with only 18 passing touchdowns. That's saying something. He gets so many rushing touchdowns, right? And now if those come down at all, if they ever stop doing the tush push, which I don't know why they would, then yeah, he's going to suffer in fantasy points. I'm not really worried about that. It's going to happen, but I'm just saying that's why he's 3 compared to the other guys. But in 2023, he was quarterback 2. In 2021, he was quarterback 1. Since 2022, he has been the quarterback 2 in fantasy points per game behind only Josh Allen, just above Lamar Jackson. He's been incredibly consistent. That's what you can say about Jalen Hurts. He rarely gives you bad games. And you don't always get that with Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. They actually feel a little bit less consistent than Jalen Hurts. But yeah, there's really nothing else to say there besides, Hurts is going to get all the rushing and the rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, Hurts is awesome. And we're into the 3 where if you take any of these guys ahead of a wide receiver or running back or tight end in the same range, we're not going to fault you. These guys are very safe. They're reliable. They're often on winning teams in fantasy. And Jalen Hurts was on one of my winning teams this year. So look, you can invest early in a quarterback and say, look, I'm giving up another position. But if you know what you're going to get and the production is be consistent and very capable of carrying your team in a given week, you go quarterback, and Jalen Hurts falls into that category.
I will say for our 1 and 2, we did have them different. But the reason why Lamar Jackson ended up number 1 is because you have Lamar Jackson number 1. I have him number 2. With Josh Allen, I had Allen as number 1. You had him number 3 behind Jalen Hurts. So that's why Lamar ends up as our 1 and Josh Allen the number 2. But I want to try to talk you into Josh Allen real quick here for number 1 potential. So quarterback 2 in 2024 in total points and points per game with literally no weapons. I mean, Khalil Shakir was his top receiving yard guy. Mac Hollins was the top receiving touchdown guy. That's pretty bad. He still finishes quarterback 2. He was quarterback 1 in 2023, quarterback 2 in 2022, quarterback 1 in 2021, quarterback 1 in 2020. I mean, for 5 straight years, he has never finished worse than the quarterback 2. That's just not what you find. Rarely, ever. Even Lamar Jackson, I mean, he has finishes with quarterback 6, 9, 8 in points per game from 2020 to 2022. He has a quarterback 3 in there in 2023. Again, Josh Allen has not finished lower than 2 in any of the last 5 seasons. Since 2020, he has averaged 23.7 points per game. First in the league, obviously. Lamar Jackson is second, but 2 full points lower than him at 21.8. So that's why I think Josh Allen is so incredibly safe. They have to get him more weapons this year. And we know he's going to finish at 1 or 2. I don't know what's safer than that.
Yeah, I think Lamar Jackson, I think just his season and what he's done in this Todd Monken offense, and it's all things even, right? I mean, you have Joe Brady coming back here for Josh Allen, so you're right, they should upgrade his personnel a little bit more, but is this just the way Josh Allen operates, right? He is at an MVP level. He did win the MVP. That's another story. If he should have over Lamar Jackson.
Yes,
but when you look, yeah, okay. Well, we'll see. But I think the numbers.
Wait, hold on. I got to say real quick. When you have an offensive player of the year who came in second place in Derrick Henry, you can't win MVP when you're playing with the running back who is a top offensive player of the year candidate.
James Cook scored a lot.
He
scored the same. He scored the same amount as Derrick Henry. Anyway, but when we look at this, Lamar Jackson put up numbers we've never seen before, right? I mean, with his passing touchdowns, his passing yardage, and his rushing yardage, and he just had a big year, and it makes it look so easy. And I think he's totally locked in this offense. And look, Derrick Henry made Lamar Jackson better in fantasy. That's okay, right? I think James Cook, the commitment to the running game with the Bills, made Josh Allen better in fantasy, right? It's okay. For our purposes, we can debate reality MVP all we want, but our purposes, we love having Derrick Henry in there because it sets up Lamar Jackson to do whatever he wants. Throw downfield, run and take off and put up points here. And the Ravens, again, I think their defense might be a little improved. The Bills' defense was a little bit better overall when you look wire to wire. So that could be something that also affects this a little bit. Maybe the Bills take a step back. The Ravens get a little bit better, less throwing overall from Lamar Jackson. But it's very close, folks. And again, I think Lamar Jackson is the ceiling guy, and I went for the ceiling guy. I think the 2 very high floor, high ceiling combination guys are Hurts and Allen. Like if you take those guys, I don't think there's any volatility. You're okay. There's a little bit of volatility with Jackson, thinking that he finished 4th there. So overall, I think it's going to be overall a very close race between these 3 guys once again, but you can't really go wrong. And again, if I see any of these 3 names on the board and I have any doubts about the other positional player, I'm going for one of these guys easily.
Yeah, and I'm giving you crap right now for having Lamar Jackson number 1 over Josh Allen, and I have Lamar Jackson number 2, right? I think he's going to be right up there with Josh. I just think Josh is a little bit more safe and consistent from a year-to-year basis. But you are right; like Lamar Jackson has shown a higher ceiling. I mean, he had that 27 point per game year in 2019. Again, though. He threw 36 touchdowns in 2019. He didn't throw more than 26 in any season until 2024. That's a large gap, right? From 36, and then it was 26, 16, 17, 24, back up to 41. So we've already seen this come back down. I would highly expect his passing touchdowns to come down a bit, but we know the rushing is going to be there. We know this offense, he's going to be great. So Lamar Jackson is still a top 2 guy at the very worst for me, and then number 1 on our consensus rankings. That is it for today's show. That's it for our quarterback rankings. We'll be getting to our tight end rankings on tomorrow's show. Don't miss it. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to us on a podcast app, leave us a review. Give us a 5-star if you're so kind. Thank you so much. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.